and welcome to Empire Watch Weekly Live. I'm Ileana Chan, and my co-host is Sara Vivacqua. Hi, Sara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Hi, Ileana. Hi, everyone who's watching us today. Thanks for being here with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share if you want other people to be educated on what the empire is preparing for us so we can push back. Please share our link so that we can grow the channel, grow our voices through the global south, the north, and beyond. Yeah. Great to be with you here today.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Unfortunately, Matthew Ho, who was supposed to come on with us today, he had to attend to a personal emergency, so he won't be joining us, but we're hoping to get him in the next 2 or 3 weeks, to talk about what's happening in the US. But we have a lot to talk about today. I mean, we had talked about before this show, we were basically like, do you think we can manage to get through it in an hour? I don't know. We'll see. We will see. Hi, Rafael Diaz. Hello.
He was on my show yesterday.
Oh, really?
Being here, yeah. He's
so
a DCM. He's a DCM. So for those who doesn't know, I also present a Brazilian show, Diário do Centro do Mundo, DCM. And Rafael is one of our audience. Thanks for being here, Rafael. Great to have you here. Send your comments, your questions. We're happy to have you participating here.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, DCM has a lot of subscribers. It's like 500,000 subscribers or something. So we're the underdog here, but we're happy, of course, to have Sara.
And not in terms of quality, I think we are doing a very important role here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. If you think, yeah.
That's true, Sara.
Yeah.
Thank you. So today, of course, we will be, not of course, but I'm actually going to put the graphic up so that we can see what we're doing. Oh, here it is. Did it go? Right. So everyone is talking about Huda Beauty canceled. I don't know if this is really true, but I'm wearing Huda Beauty now. This is not a good idea.
Put it on the other side. Yeah.
On the other side. Oh.
No, the other side. Yeah, on your left-hand side. Or your right-hand side. Yeah, move it to your right-hand side. We can't see Huda. Okay. I did not know the brand.
Yeah, I like it. Fun stuff. I obviously can't do makeup the way she can. So, but we're going to be talking about that a little bit because it's to do with the manufacturing of consent around the Iran protests in the US. So we're going to touch upon that. And then we're going to talk about China's shakeup in military ranks, because again, another manufacturing of consent, but what's actually happening? I actually had to go and watch some Taiwan news to figure out what's going on. So let's see how good my language skills are, but I think I learned some stuff there. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the ICE killings, ICE killings related to the shootings. There have, I'm saying that in relation to the shootings because last year already there were 32 deaths via ICE in ICE custody. And this year there has been 9 deaths due to ICE, but 3 of them in ICE-related shootings. So it's it's escalating, I suppose you could say. And then also the general strike in Minneapolis, which is that the way forward? So I'd love to discuss that with you, Sara. And finally, Keir Starmer's China visit. I'm calling it the two-faced diplomacy, but it's a matter of, basically the question we're going to be asking ourselves is, are the rats fleeing the Titanic? Let's see whether or not that's what's happening. And of course, if anyone watching has any comments or questions, because we don't have a special guest, we're going to consider you guys the special guest. So don't go crazy, but we'd love to answer any questions or comments. Okay, cool. So first things first, Huda Beauty canceled. As I said, I am wearing Huda Beauty. Don't judge her.
How is her makeup? Is it good?
I mean, it's fun stuff. It's really for baddies. You know that term baddies? Like people people who really know how to do contouring and like really huge eyelashes and stuff. So it's not really for me generally, but I like it.
Like Kim Kardashian style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So
Yeah.
obviously that's not me, but I just like the colors. Like there's a lot of fun colors. Of course when there's no product placement here, so like calm down. But I think what's interesting about this big like cancel Huda thing, or maybe predictable, is that she was one of the few pro-Palestine I would say she's a celebrity, but you know, she's actually a celebrity because like her makeup is so famous, right? So she was one of the few very outspoken pro-Palestine people. She's an Iraqi American. She's not actually Palestinian, but she spoke up in support of Palestine. And then like the controversy right now is like, just because she posted on her stories and Instagram, one of the protesters in Iran, who's actually not an anti-regime protester, but an anti-Shah, right? Because right now we're kind of looking at this protests in Iran. For those of you who might not be caught up yet, I mean, or it can be a bit confusing at the moment because of all the bombardment of media. But basically, we're kind of looking at something that started as an economic type of protest, because as we remember, you know, the US has had some extremely, extremely serious sanctions against Iran for a really long time now. I think there's something like over 500 sanctions. So it's very, very complete. It's one of the most expansive unilateral sanction regimes against a country. And of course, this is going to cause a lot of economic hardship. And so the beginnings of the protests came from more of an economic hardship type of gripe. But in true fashion, which is like in the current geopolitical type of world that we live in, anytime a country has some sort of protest and you haven't, in your country, if you haven't fortified yourself against foreign influence completely, there's going to be like, it's going to be seen as kind of like an opening for the US to sort of come in with different type of like propaganda fronts to destabilize your country. And so, as we reported before, you know, key US officials have actually said there's Mossad on the ground, probably acting as agent provocateur.
Mossad itself, you know, if you go Mossad party itself, they were bragging about being on the ground and causing disruption and trying to create a situation of total chaos in Iran. Well, first, it was very interesting watching Alistair Cook talking about the Iran case. He's a very knowledgeable man. And what he was saying is, first of all, Israel did a military attack on Iran. It worked, but it worked partially, not up to the expectations. The expectations that in one day or two, Iran will succumb. That didn't happen. Then they started with a classic color revolution with more extreme means, infiltrating people on protests against the government, which I do understand. If Iran was such a dictator regime, why would people go protest on the streets? Try to protest in Egypt. If you are 12 people aggregated somewhere in Egypt, you get arrested. I got arrested in Egypt for being a group of 12 people. So in Iran, there were massive protests against the economic situation. Of course, when you are sanctioned, it's a very vulnerable economy, and you have an underground economy. The underground economy does raise more corruption. It has to do a lot to do with sanctions. The government said, yes, we failed economically. They admitted it. And the interesting thing is when the protests turned against the official forces of Iran, people revert their sides and went thousands and thousands marching pro-Iran. They understood Iranian people are very politicized. But the BBC, the CNN did not show. They showed the protests pro-Iran as against Iran. And as soon as the Iran government cut the internet, the whole disruption stopped because it wasn't organic. But Ileana, about Huda, I understand. Why was she cancelled? Why? What caused so much outrage?
Because she just posted on her stories on Instagram. She was posting one of the protesters that was let's actually bring that up here.
This video here. Look,
here.
is this video?
Yeah, this is, well, I think, yeah. So basically this image here, that is, I guess, one of the protesters that is against the, they're calling it pro-regime, but basically they're against like foreign interference, and they're against, because if you see here,
Netanyahu being burned down, Trump being burned down.
Yeah, exactly.
Dream come true, let's say.
Yeah, so basically they're against US or Western interference. But like you're saying, I think that is, for some coverage, being shown as like anti-regime protests, but she's actually showing the picture of them burning, like they're burning Trump, etc. So because of that, like, you know, she's primarily in the US, right? She's American. Americans right now are very susceptible to this sort of color revolution narrative, where it's like these countries around the world, if they're protesters, Gen Z protesters, etc., they just want freedom, and like we have to support them, with no understanding of actually that's how US imperialism works. You know, it has historically had these color revolutions all across the world, specifically using NED or USAID agencies funding NGOs, etc., in other countries to create this sort of narrative around wanting democracy and freedom, etc. And it sort of pushes a lot of the quote unquote youth, but I mean, in many cases, not even the youth, onto the streets asking for these things. But how we can know that it's not organic or it's not tangible, it's not genuinely a revolutionary protest, is because the demands are ridiculous. Like if you're asking for US intervention, or if you're asking for democracy and freedom without any sort of tangible demands, you know full well this is the most easy protests to co-opt are ones that don't have core principles and like core tangible demands from the government, right? So it's kind of the same thing. And I think we're entering a time now where color revolutions are more sophisticated as well. So a lot of times when I talk about like the Napoli Gen Z protests, and I'm like, you know, that's probably a color revolution, people would be like, you are undermining the fact that there were, you know, people on the ground organizing. And it's I think that's the thing, is that we have to be careful now, is that there can be legitimate gripes, legitimate issues, legitimate people and organizing on the ground. But if the US or a foreign power co-opts these groups, then the utility of your protest is diminished. Essentially, it becomes a color revolution.
And it's a problem because it removes nations the right to protest from abroad. You know, those critics, they come from within. They are from Iranians to Iranians. And as soon as there's cooptation or there's violence being infiltrated, because in the case of Iran, they couldn't co-opt. They tried to co-opt, they tried to help separatism in Iran, didn't work out. But they infiltrated with death, with violence, genuine protest. So they are removing the right of free speech from Iranian people with this color revolution tip. I have here the video that you mentioned. Look, I think it's just such a non-controversial video, and I wonder why she was cancelled if it was really organic. Look at that. Because of this video.
I mean, we could say, we can make some sort of reason for, you know, the reason why this sort of took off in this way, but I think there are always different components to it. Like, one, it's not like this idea is a new idea, right? We're talking about decades of propaganda against Iran, against how horrific their regime is, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking about decades of propaganda already as the foundation here. And then, you know, and then we have to think about how these ideas get proliferated across media platforms, because essentially news media organizations will take it and be like, oh, is Huda canceled, etc., and that sort of like spreads, so it can be, it's like, it doesn't have to be a completely manufactured campaign to still be utilized for manufacturing propaganda.
Yeah, they can co-opt. But like the Zen generation in Mexico, as we saw here, it was not organic at all. It was paid, it was planted. There were millions of dollars involved by high Mexican elite. I think that the elites push for that.
For sure. But I would say that that's definitely I think that is the case in terms of Mexico, which is a strongly sovereign seeking country. But when we're talking about the US, the entire, the US itself, it's not even foreign interference, it's the US itself, like the huge propaganda machine in the US is all towards that narrative. So I think it's pretty easy, you don't need a huge coordinated campaign in the US to spur
in the UK. I don't know, Ileana, what you think, but having worked in the British government as a lawyer, it's unbelievable the level of hostility towards Iran, towards Russia, towards Venezuela. They treat those countries as monsters. It's very easy for them to buy this propaganda. It's such an anachronic imperialist worldview that they have there. And I'm talking people who think they are progressive, who think they are pro-human rights, and they come lecturing the world about human rights that they are failing to follow on the ground. So working for the British government was, in that sense, was very scary to see people baking cookies for Ukrainian when they ask a rabbi to pray for the victims in Israel amid a genocide in Palestine. That's the things that and people support that. A lot of people support that, especially the white British. The white British does think of Russia as an enemy state. And this is such an old-fashioned way, such a simplorious way to look at the world.
We have to really position it in terms of U.S. imperialism. I mean, I'm just saying U.S. imperialism, but it's really Western imperialism, right? Because you have to kind of think of it that way. Otherwise, people get so confused. That's why they go pro-Palestinian. They go from being pro-Palestinian to now pro-Iranian protests. And it's like when you're actually looking at the power structure and what is causing this type of destabilization, it is U.S. imperialism. And if you don't have that framing, then you're so confused. You go pro-Ukraine, and then Al-Qaeda gets put, Al-Qaeda in the head of Syria. You're like, oh, that's good. You know what I mean? Like it's
about the macro structure that moves all those forces. Actually, you are inviting people to think in a way that Karl Marx thought about things. Let's talk. There is the microstructure, but how does it fit in a microstructure? Fits in the macro structure, right? Let's dissect and let's try to understand events from this view, and not from the imperialistic view, not from the view of racial superiority, from cultural superiority, because those are very outdated ways of thinking that put the whole culture behind everything else. Let's see, we are seeing this global south rising, but they can't deal with that. They can't even acknowledge it.
I mean, I think that is one of the issues that we're really having, I think, difficulty with penetrating, I would say, is also just human nature. Human nature likes to feel, especially if you're in the West, and this has been your entire identity, that you're superior. Like you're morally superior, intellectually superior, some sort of thing like that. So you can see it in the way that people are actually condemning Huda right now. Like the way they're like, I'm an Iranian American and how dare you? And it's just like this moral righteousness, when in actuality, the US is by far the biggest really criminal against humanity. I mean, there's no comparison at all. So I mean,
let's watch what Huda had to say.
you know, watch that if you want to go on to ICE. Like, I feel like
I know a lot of people all over the world are very, very upset. A lot of Iranians who've left Iran are very upset with what's going on in Iran, and I really, truly feel for a lot of people. And I also feel for a lot of people in Iran who are going through things that I just can't imagine. I'm seeing a lot of people online right now saying I'm pro-regime. Transparently, I'm not pro-regime, but I also don't know enough about the regime. I've heard a lot of mixed things. And I don't think I have the right to have an opinion on what's going on in Iran. This is just my opinion. I don't believe that I have the right to have an opinion and to voice my opinion on something that is happening internally in a country. And people are comparing it to Palestine and Israel. It's very different. There was a country oppressing another country. This is internal issues. As an Iraqi, we had internal issues. And we had America come save us. Guess what? 2.5 decades later, the country is in shambles. And America and Israel have never done anything good for the Middle East. And you have to wonder why they want to go into any country in the first place. I know a lot of people all over.
I thought it was very interesting, this video, because in one way she cancels herself. I don't have a right to opinion. I don't have a, well, why you don't have a right to opinion? Everybody does. But the main point she brought in, we know how intervention look like. I'm against an intervention. Whether Iranians believe they live in a good government or not, it's up to the Iranians to choose.
I think her framing is still a little bit unsophisticated, right? Because it's just like this idea of like, why is Palestine? I mean, why are we allowed to have an opinion on Palestine but not have opinion on Iran? You know, and it's like, again, this idea, you're American, for God's sake. You know, your country is literally funding, you know, we've talked about this for so long now, but there is, and actually, I have a really interesting interview that I just did with Batul Subaiti, British Lebanese political commentator. And we talked about Israel in the region and how it fits into the US agenda in that region. And what would happen, for example, you know, because I asked her this idea of what is, if Israel was taken out of this scenario because maybe its mask is slipping, where could the US turn in that region to gain more power? And she had like a really interesting idea. It's like, basically, there's nothing to replace Israel right now in that region. Israel is actually very unique in the way that it was set up as part of US imperialism. So it's a really great interview. I would suggest watching it. It'll be out on Tuesday. I'm just going to plug that. But basically the main thing is the way that she frames it, without the acknowledgement and accountability of the US within all these geopolitical issues that we're having in the world, including what Iran is facing. It just shows, I think, that one, she is actually more informed than the average American, probably the average US person, possibly, because she at least is pro-Palestine, you know? And yet, this is showing a deep, deep vacuum here of understanding in terms of...
And do you know, Ileana, I think Americans are suffering internally with their own worldview. Because this is not something that you just practice abroad. It comes from within. Within, you have a super surveillance state. You have this oppressive state. And I don't know if you've seen Atlantic, the newspaper Atlantic, saying, yes, it's fascism. We have held back this denomination for a long time. But now we see the code of a leader, an authoritarian leader, law as a way of suppression of civil rights and fundamental rights. We are happy to call Donald Trump a fascist regime. And I think when we need to have the courage to put the names as they are. Why America cannot have this label of fascism? You know, why can we not apply when it's there? Walks like a fascist, talks like a fascist, barks like a fascist, kills like a fascist regime, a terror regime. So I think US people are suffering, and they are planning for answers and a different way of viewing things. So sometimes I'm surprised that our main audience is the US audience, because probably these people are trying to understand and are feeling in solitude about what's going on. I don't know if it's one of the possibilities, I think.
Well, I mean, I lived in the US for 13 years, and I think I felt gaslit every day by the US media apparatus, and I'm sure lots of people in the US feel that too. But let's go. So, I mean, you're introducing it really well, but let's go into the ICE killings in the US right now, because you're sort of touching upon it. And I think one of the terms that I've been hearing lately is the imperial boomerang, which is just talking about your imperial tactics that you use overseas eventually comes back and is used on your own people domestically. I do want to say, yes, that is much more obvious now, and I think very clear with what's happening with ICE, etc. But I do want to just emphasize that it's never really. It has been in the US pretty much all the time. It's just been covered up really successfully. So, like, if we think of things like COINTELPRO, where they basically got rid of all the communist or socialist leading thought leaders in the US, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, like Fred Hampton, etc. It's not like these tactics haven't been used domestically. So I think that is important to acknowledge, but it's been so from history books that people don't really necessarily acknowledge it. So yeah, I think it's an important thing to realize. Also, there were black sites, if we remember domestically, black sites. I guess they got disclosed, but they were found out. Black sites, as in like torture sites domestically in the US for supposedly Homeland Security. So these tactics have been domestically in the US. It's just that now we're looking at such a bigger, more obvious and
an escalation in a way, because before they had a bit of a sanitary line where they wouldn't cross to maintain the appearance of democracy, but Trump doesn't care about maintaining appearances, so he's going full blown for everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing as to, and we can talk about it more later, but should we set up, I mean, we should talk about maybe in terms of how much Trump cares about public perception of what he's doing. In what way does he care? How is he marketing to his base?
I think he's marketing to his base, yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Let's see whether or not it's working, but do you want to set up what's happened?
Yeah, so first of all, we're going to show some videos here which are very disturbing, which involve the killing of Alex Pretty. It also involves the killing of Renee Good. And it's very interesting, Ileana. Alex Pretty is a change in this scenario. And now I'm going to get into that. Why is it changed? By the Renee Good killings, there were still people saying, well, she put the car on him. They were trying to create a controversy, which is a dishonest argument. But it's still, there was this type of excuse and justification from the MAGA base. When you're saying why Trump is doing this, I think because there is a public demand for violence against migrants. Look at the story of America. You went there with guns, you decimate the entire native populations. It's a country forged in violence, in colonization. Yeah. I mean, the real Americans are those Mexican, Indian-looking faces, indigenous-looking faces that they are removing from the territory. They are the owners. If you think strictly, the white arrived at much later, much, much, much later, and destroy their existence. So the very people they are expelling are actually, historically, the people with the right to live there. It's a double colonization. I think it's just so perverse. But Americans love that. The MAGA movement, they might not be very happy with Israel first. There are fractures in terms of Palestine. There are fractures in expanding the military budget, but they approve full on a racial war. I haven't seen any of them complaining. On the other hand, I have here a video of Megyn Kelly. Look how she justifies the killing of Renee Good. Let me try to find this here. But basically, you would expect that people would say, okay, this is too much. We don't need to go killing people. But no, she is actually saying, oh, let me break down for you the video and let me tell you exactly what happened. Megyn Kelly is a huge influencer from MAGA. She's against Trump, and she's been critical of Trump in many, many issues, but not in that one. In that one, she's very, very happy to justify and say, look, Renee Good. She selects some images that could be ambivalent and say this video is fully supportive of the police. I'll try to find this video here later on. It's really shocking, to be honest with you.
Okay, so we'll find that video. But I think the thing that is interesting but essentially, is that Renee Good, I think she was, it seemed like she was part of the LGBT community, and she was white. So that at least sort of, you know what I mean? That at least is it kind of lays bare a little bit more of the weird justifications that they're using to gun down people. Like and like you're saying, Alex Petrie again is creating not so much a split. It's not really a split in MAGA, but a sort of a conversation in MAGA, because it's about the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I was talking to a source in the US, and he's saying, until Renee Good, people will still find excuses. But the problem with Alex is Alex was a nurse for the veterans. He is and it was explicit footage that you cannot say otherwise what happened. And also the Americans, well, okay, let's get into it. Why Alex Petrie? Let me put a bit of, so Alex Jeffrey Petrie, he was a 37 years old American nurse who worked in the intensive care of the unit in Minneapolis VA healthcare system. So he was serving veterans. He was fatally shot on the 24th of January in Minneapolis by Federal Immigration Enforcement, ICE. And the witness account, they say that, and the video evidence clearly shows him trying to help a woman that had been shoved by the agents. So he came to help this woman, and after he was pepper sprayed, there was then they shoot him. So there is forensic audio analysis by ABC, and they found out 10 shots were fired in 5 seconds. Do you really need to fire 10 shots in a second? So it's really beautiful what they said today. The family said, today we remember that freedom is not free. We have to work it.
No, so that is actually part of a speech that Alex Petrie said in a video.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, but you're right. Like the way that they gunned him down essentially, and then so the difference between this and Renee Good, they still try to use a self-defense thing. That's their major playbook. They were trying to say that he either was armed or he had a concealed carry permit, which is illegal in that state. It's legal in the US in that state. So even if he was armed, it wasn't necessarily like he was he wasn't
armed, Ileana. Look, we have here
no
footage.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sarah. He wasn't holding a gun, but he could possibly have had a gun on his person because he had a concealed carry permit, which is legal under the Second Amendment. Yes. So he wasn't brandishing a gun.
No, he had apparently he had the gun with him. The gun was in the car. Yeah. And Donald Trump so they are using the fact that he had a gun license to say that he was carrying a gun, but he wasn't. It's pretty clear he had a cell phone.
It doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is it's legal, and this is where the supposed split in MAGA is happening, because the right has said from the beginning, we have the Second Amendment, which means the right to carry arms. They have legal permits to carry arms. You cannot just shoot somebody because they have a legal permit to carry an arm.
Exactly.
Right?
So the MAGA people are like, well, I have the right to carry a gun. Does that mean the ICE is going to shoot me? What about my freedom of carrying a gun, to go into a baker shop carrying a gun? It's crazy to be in a country where you go to a pharmacy and there might be people carrying guns. And you're driving a car and you are afraid to say anything because it could turn out a fatal shooting. Actually, I think it's how does that reconcile with the right to live?
Well, no, because that's the problem with, I think, the way that the US talks about human rights. They always prioritize one human right at a time over everything else. So if they prioritize freedom of speech, it will be freedom of speech despite anything, over the right to have shelter, the right to have food, the right to have, so etc. So it's just like this.
Depending who is claiming that right. If it's Donald Trump claiming this right, the right to carry a gun is absolute. If it's Donald Trump talking and the libertarian talking, the freedom of speech, of aggression, of racial diminishing people, it's bigger than anything else. Spreading lies becomes freedom of speech, which shouldn't be part of it. Freedom of speech is about opinion, not about facts that you can prove otherwise. So as you say, here is so clear, is undisputed, that what he's holding is not a gun, is a cell phone. And using his right to carry a gun to say that he could be shot, it's a problem for MAGA, as you say. What about my right to carry a gun? Am I going to be shot by a police officer because I'm carrying a gun? And I'm going to show you guys the video. This is a very disturbing video, Ileana. The video of what actually happened. It's disheartening. But yeah, carry on. You want to say something?
And I wanted to just position this speech that you were about to read out by Alex Ruprecht, because it shows us. Okay, so let's read it and then we'll just talk. So he says today, and this was a video of him prior to his death. But today we remember that freedom is not free. We have to work at it, nurture it, protect it, and even sacrifice for it. We may never forget and always remember our brothers and sisters who have served so that we may enjoy the gift of freedom. Like, remember, he's a nurse in the Veteran Affairs Hospital, right? He is dealing with these military personnel that come back often with PTSD, injuries, emotional problems, etc. And he still believes this absolutely delusional US imperialist line. He is seeing the effects of war in his job daily, and also just bearing in mind that the suicide rates for veterans are so high. They're higher than the average.
And homicides, they are very often involved in homicides as well.
But their suicide rates exceeded the amount of casualties in the Afghan and Iraq war.
Wow.
Can you imagine? So,
no.
That idea itself, that we enjoy the gift of freedom. He is a completely brainwashed individual.
Yeah.
And yet, he could see that what ICE is doing is wrong. And also that they gunned him down, with no regard to the imperialist project that they're essentially building, right, or have been building. So this is kind of like we've been talking about, this decline of the US empire and the contradictions that are arising, because it's really exhausted its abilities, I think, at this point. And that's why we're seeing this type of chaos.
Yeah, exactly. You touch a very sensitive point. Probably people won't see this being talked anywhere else, because it demands a lot of courage to say Alex is a victim. It's a victim. There is no discussion about that. But as you say, they're singing war as not only war, but imperialistic control. as a form of guarantee internal freedom in America. So when you say actually he had a lot of, he coincided with a lot of the American ideology, but it's interesting to say that in the case of ICE, he didn't side with ICE. You know, in this case, his moral ground is, this is wrong. I don't want a racial war. And this, yeah, and I think he was very courageous.
Yeah, I mean, clearly.
Yeah, very
but-
courageous. I don't know. Have you had anyone holding a gun to you? I have had one person holding a gun to me, a semi-automatic, in Brazil, and I have had Egyptian authority holding guns on us. You freeze. You totally lose your ability to react or to think about a reaction. He was extremely, extremely brave, and to defend this woman from ICE. So it looks like, let's see the video. It's a very disheartening video. If you have issues in watching those things, just give it a pause. Yeah, I think it's really difficult to watch this.
Yeah, unroll your windows. There's fans.
He clearly has a cell phone in his hand, and his other hand is free.
Fuck off! Pieces of shit.
We have another video this shows clearly that he had a cell phone in one hand and nothing in the other hand. So if he had a gun license, they must have known this after the fact. You know, I don't think there was no gun here.
It's nothing to do with self-defense. It's just completely fabricated by whoever's trying to.
Completely fabricated. And here we have the video of his shooting. It's really difficult to watch.
They ain't doing too much, man, and they keep pushing people, you know.
Oh shit! What the fuck? They killed him? Did they fucking kill that guy? Are you fucking kidding me, dude? Not again. Are you fucking kidding me?
Oh, I'm just gonna read some of the comments of some people that have. But go ahead. Somebody has left actually because they're very upset because they're saying the Democrats are not any better by, and it's like, I don't know what it takes for people to understand that the Democrats are part of the U.S. empire. They're part of the establishment imperialist U.S. System. So this idea that we're like, oh, well, Republicans suck, but it's just completely brain dead. However,
well, I would say there's no doubt it's whatever anti-imperial forces in the US, they are crushed by the system. Let's see that the Black Panthers, they were crushed with total violence. Yeah, whatever, there is a more radical America, there is an anti-imperialistic America. We see our fellow journalists talking very bluntly about there is internal critic, and there are people thirsty for this critic, and it's a complex society. Yeah, you have someone chewing.
It's a complex society, but having lived there for so long, I would say, we cannot underestimate the power of propaganda. It is so extreme. It's like what you were saying when you visit Europe or whatever. I mean, but it's even worse in the US because it's a much bigger country. A lot of them just consume American propaganda. So the average person is really not going to understand the existence of the U.S. imperialist system or really the crimes of their country. They're just not going to, because they're not going to get it from anywhere. Random person on YouTube will not compete with decades for them of indoctrination via schools, via education institutions.
No, absolutely. This is outside of the dispute. And I think it's outside of the dispute. Probably, I would say in Brazil, people think of democratic as being a left wing. No, they are not. They are part of the empire. Yeah, that's an absolutely wrong wrong way of reading the American power context. There is no doubt there is a bipartisan system that exclude anything that doesn't fit within the deep state. And within the deep state, I mean the military complex and censorship complex, the deepest spy structures in the US. But I think for a Black person, for a migrant, there's less violence under the Democrats. I think what we see, we cannot make everything equal and relative. What we are seeing under Trump is sheer violence. It does make life difficult. And it's just more explicit, it's just more didactic. But a special quality to Trump that we cannot deny. And if you have
I would say
Trump, is
however,
because of society that support this. If you have and you have people.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that, Sarah, because one of the differences, yes, Trump is more obvious, yes. However, because Trump was not reelected into 2020, we had like Trump, Biden, Trump. And during the Biden's term, there was not any genuine reverses on a lot of what Trump's policies were. So yes, he had a veneer of like civility, but a lot of the things like kids in cages, etc., was still happening under Biden. So it's just that most people fell asleep, and now, so I guess the real test of it is if Democrats win the next election, how are things going to change?
I don't know, but I would say for the global South, Trump is very problematic. Trump can mobilize the ultra-right. Trump is already hijacking democracies around the world. Trump has hijacked Maduro.
But that hasn't been true.
Trying to annex. Yeah, no, for the Brazilian elections, it is definitely a problem of interference. When Trump was in power, he helped Bolsonaro to be in power. He can mobilize the far right throughout the world. For us Brazilian, Trump in power makes a difference. It's worse.
I would just push back on that because I think that there's ample evidence to suggest that even when it's not a Republican in power, that these things exist. They're still destabilizing regimes.
I'll have to push back on that because when we had Lula's election, we had the US. We had several discussions with US for non-interference, and then Joe Biden and the US military said we're not going to interfere in the election. I have no doubt that Democrats are warmongers, they intervene in other countries, but Trump belongs to the far right fascism. Fascism is something very, very special.
There's always been US fascism internationally. It's just that it's more obvious domestically under Trump. But in terms of the way that US empire attempts to exert its hegemony of the world, it's always been a dictatorial way. US imperialism has never been like more benign. It's just been covered. Like if you think about Obama that won the Nobel Peace Prize, he has had more drone strikes than Bush before.
Yeah, he has deported more people than Trump. He was more effective, but there was less violence. No.
It's a trajectory. I mean, for Venezuela, the US sanctions were under Obama first. I mean, it's different if each administration would come in and reverse what the previous administration did. And so far, we're not really seeing that. I mean, it is continual. It's just the way that they promote it and the way that they propagandize around it is very...
I totally agree with you. I mean, there's no... It's one of the things obviously that the same imperialist machinery that will serve the imperialist rage, theory, and devastation, destruction. But I totally disagree with the fact to say that there are less violations through Trump. I think for the Black,
I never said there were less violations through Trump.
I think fascism, and Trump has an incredible ability to mobilize the far right throughout the world. Trump was imposing tariffs in Brazil and say if Bolsonaro is not released,
I am
we're
not
gonna carry
saying
on with the
in any
tariffs
way-
because he was here,
I
he was
am
being
not
fed.
saying in any way that Trump is not doing these things, by the way. I am not saying that at all. I am simply
There is a matter of degree, and I think it's Trump has less barriers, moral barriers. It's not
He is
only a
more
veneer, it's less barriers, and he doesn't believe in democracy at all. He doesn't believe in human rights at all. He doesn't
Neither
believe
do
in
any of the
human
others.
rights at
US
all.
imperialism does not believe in human rights. Are you crazy? No, come on. You know
No,
that.
internally, they want to make some areas
I'm not
of
disagreeing with you that Trump is more overt in his imperialism.
not only overt, more intense. There is a
Perhaps.
special quality of that.
Maybe we'll see, but I think one
I'm
of the
already seeing it.
one of the biggest dangers is if the Democrats win next time, how much are they going to cover what they're doing? This is my entire point, is that, you know, it doesn't matter which administration is in power. It's like you're saying, the deep state remains the same. The warmongering remains the same. The tactics may change somewhat. The level of casualties around the global South are, you know, they have acted with impunity.
What you're saying is the worse the better, in the sense that maybe Trump is speeding up the fall of the empire by making it so intense, by making it so boundless. That could be true. When you go saying, I want Greenland because I want Greenland, because Greenland belongs to me, because after the war, Greenland belonged to America. We saved you from the Nazis, Denmark. Now give me Greenland back. So yes, you know, this type of people you invite for a party, and they come with a half of a bottle of wine open in their mouth and say, this is your present. So Trump is savage.
He says things out loud, but the fact is, when we're talking to Lotte, remember we had the chairperson of the Danish Communist Party on Weekly Live like a few weeks ago. You know, she made a really good point that the U.S. already has a military base there. They already have the control that they want in Greenland, and yet Trump is just saying these things as if the U.S. presence is not already in Greenland and has basically the control that he's saying that he wants.
You want to formalize the annexation of Greenland. Okay, we already have control. Now we want it as part of our territory. That makes a difference. It does make a difference. You see, the Europeans, they didn't like that.
I know, but I mean, in terms of a geopolitical analysis, what we're seeing is like Trump somewhat alienating his allies, right? And like we said, it's a lot of political theater. It's not really tangibly, are they going to actually make the moves to be independent? I mean, we hope so, but
I don't know. I think he's unpredictable. I think he depends what, because Trump is not really very ideological. I think the people around him are. Marco Rubio is the ultimate gusano that you could possibly think of. You know, and I think they feed Trump information, and Trump, like, they feed him obviously wrong information about Iran, because he thought he would come and devastate Iran. It didn't work out. You know, Brazil, the same thing. They were feeding him information about Brazil and how easy it would be to topple Lula and how easy it would be. It didn't work out, you know, so he had to push back. So I think Trump bluffs, and if he gets good, if he not, he push back. You know, I think it's a bluffing. That's how he probably make his empire, by expropriating other people's abilities and by bluffing. And if the bluff work, he would take it for him. If it doesn't work, he will see it again, reframe the strategy, and when he's wrong, he doubles down.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a very cohesive strategy. He basically says whatever he wants to say, and it makes it much more obvious for the rest of us to see U.S. imperialism at play, because, you know, I did also have this conversation with Radhika Desai recently, where she was talking about how much of, and her stance is actually pretty controversial, but like the idea is like how much is, you know, Trump overstates almost everything. But how much is the US's tangible, actual power right now reaching the level of his rhetoric? And it doesn't seem like it's there. It's not equal, obviously, because Trump's such an exaggerator. So he makes it much more obvious for us to see what the US empire really is about, right? Which is trying.
But then there is something that is inherent to power. It always has to project to be bigger than it is. This is one of the core elements of power. If you enter into a church, it is just magnet. And when they're really, really powerful, they tend to be a bit quiet about it. So the power always want to disguise how much reality is behind it. Yeah. And plays with the symbolic elements of power. It's part of the game. So Trump knows very well that he said, no matter how bad the negotiation is, you need to say it was a success. He plays with that.
He's a showman, you know. One of our comments, Cal Skybreaker says, Trump just says the quiet part out loud. He is not the traditional politician. He doesn't measure his words like most people who follow politics are used to.
Yeah, and that makes him very popular, I think, among Americans.
Yes, and he is a grifter and a con man. Yes, I agree. I mean, he's like mainly a showman, is what he is, a very performative person. But yes, I think like what we demonstrated in our argument just there is what I think is kind of happening right now in the US. There's sort of like the people that are anti-Trump, and there are some people that are actually tangibly trying to fight against ICE in terms of like in Minnesota last week, there was the general strike that happened, and this Minneapolis really. And today too, they're doing another one. There was a sort of a suggestion of that people like us who are outside of the US, if you wanted to support that action, to just not buy anything that's American, which I agree with. Like,
absolutely, I'm not buying anything American. Look at what last week's protest. Ileana, these are freezing temperatures. I think the real feels minus 10 degrees. Look at that. This is Minneapolis after the
Like they just have to hold it a little more taut.
Ileana, I have a question for you there. It looks, at least in the north of the US, we see pushback. We see a society that is outraged. It's a huge demonstration, and it's you can see it's heartfelt. In the South, we have ISIS doing the same thing, Louisiana, but we don't see the same reaction. People are talking about a civil war. Do you agree with that reading? What do you think about that? Do you feel there is pushback? Do you feel Trump is actually pleasing MAGA more than ever? This is something that it's difficult to read.
I mean, I think there's several factors here. Firstly, I do think that civil war is perhaps a little bit optimistic. I mean, like, obviously in the US that you're not going to think that way, but like, I mean, in terms of the ability for a revolutionary force to come up against the establishment, I don't really see that. Right? Like we have different factions that are divided and upset about ICE for sure. I mean, and certainly this general strike is historic. It's really an important thing and that it's happening. So we hope that it will grow. But in terms of like a civil war where there's an organized movement that will, that has a coherent core principle and understood, way to disrupt the government, I don't see it. Do you see it anywhere? I'm not really seeing that. I mean, part of the issue is just like our conversation that we were just having, was that a lot of these people on the street are going to be, of course, against ICE because of what has happened, the deaths. But a lot of them are going to just single out Trump, by himself, right? Which in terms of like some sort of civil war, some sort of revolutionary movement is going to be extremely limited, because then are those energies just going to be funneled into voting for a Democrat?
Do you think Trump has an agenda with it? Is he trying to please his base with his eyes? Let me just go back to a very interesting fact. Probably endorsing the fact that Trump can be extremely or more vile in terms of intensity. It's about the one big beautiful bill. Have you heard of it? Let me take this beautiful bill. It's really insane what the level of super financing. It's called One Big Beautiful Bill. Now it's an act. So what exactly?
Oh, you muted yourself. You're muted, Sarah. You're muted. I'm just going to read out ode to John Trundle's comment, which is a really good point. Note that there has been a lot of grassroots organizing in Minneapolis and Minnesota for years. This is not a spontaneous combustion. Of course, like you cannot get to a general strike without years of grassroots organizing. It would never have happened. Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that it has happened is an incredible achievement. I'm just saying that's not necessarily indications of a civil war, which is something completely different, I would say, right?
Yeah. So I just want to go back about the super funding of ICE and this law.
The beautiful bill thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not only a bill, it's a federal law. It's HR 119th Congress. It was passed through this law, the budget reconciliation. So that means it has contained this time around an extraordinary increase in resources for the immigration enforcement apparatus, which is DHS, including ISIS. And we are talking about 170 billion injected into immigration enforcement systems. And what does that mean? It means the expansion of detention, so resources to increase the detention capability, like people getting arrested, concentration camps, and to operate the detention system. Then you have an expansion of the enforcement and removals. So it's resources for operations, logistic, execution of removals, deportations, and funds and support mechanisms for.
Oh no, he's frozen.
Oh, I'm back.
You're back. You're back.
So Trump, so the federal state is going to reimburse and subsidize immigration enforcement related actions locally. Then they improved the border infrastructure. So I think we can comfortably say that we have a super funded ICE. This is it's the most heavily funded federal law enforcement structure that has ever been. I have even the chart here of the super funding. It's really impressive. It's on the Our Revolution one. I don't know if you can pull this up. But we have here a extremely well-funded ICE, as you never had before. ICE was created after the 7/11, right?
9/11.
Sorry, 9/11. So that's already, you can see it was for migration as terrorists. Yeah, people of color of terrorists. You can say there is this perspective in ICE.
It's an expansion of the Homeland Security Act.
Absolutely. So there is in its structure a very foundational racist element. And it's also very important to say that democracy now has birthed a story. I think they birthed the story that now the recruitment of ICE is recruiting far-right radical armed militias to integrate. I was talking to a source in the US, and he was saying that before to belong to ICE, you need to go for a 1-year process. Now you just present yourself and you win. And so they are aiming with very fascist propaganda, racist propaganda, trying to recruit people online. And we do remember Matt Kenner that came here. He wrote a book about irregular army, how the US hired Nazi mercenaries to fight in their war abroad. Now they're doing the same at home.
I mean, there is also just sort of material conditions that would sort of lead to this, because we're looking at an economically depressed country, essentially, where unemployment's probably up, poverty is up, there's a lack of healthcare, etc. And one of the recruitment drives for ICE, you know, like you rightly said, there are some areas that the recruitment hasn't been up, and they had incentives like $10,000 to $20,000 to someone who's like impoverished or struggling with bills or struggling with rent. You know, that is a significant amount of money. And also they were going to pay off student loans, which, remember, there was like a huge thing in like the previous electoral campaigns about like student loans and why they can't be paid off. So there's like huge incentives to recruiting to joining ICE, they're really funding it. And so I think, to your point, like almost with everything to do with Trump, it's like, what is his strategy versus the result of it? There's one element that's always like, yes, he does pander to his base. But one of the analysis for why he lost 2020 was that he had somehow maybe lost touch with a lot of his base, which was initially working class people. But instead, and truly, because he wasn't really for the working class people, it was more like a marketing thing for him. Mm-hmm. Certainly, I think what you're seeing is that the things that he is identifying as his base, which is like you said, racism, anti-immigrant sentiment, like this sort of pro-macho, pro-war type of rhetoric. I think he's doubling down on the things that he perceives are his base. And anti-immigration sentiment is obviously one of them. So ICE sort of makes sense. But when you start, like, there are consequences to your actions. And essentially, once they've started the ball on this, the recruitment drive being what it is, and then when you've recruited this many people, there's incentives according to like whether or not, how many arrests you have, how many, you know, there's going to be certain things within that structure that make it more and more violent, more and more aggressive.
Yeah, so, you say they're preying on people's desperation, lack of food on the table. Of course, people who are going to join ISIS are people who probably are being long time. Probably Latinos will be an army of Latinos persecuting Latinos, an arm of Asians persecuting Asians. And look, look at this graph. Look the jump of the initial fund through the one big, beautiful bill. I think that it's also very perverse, this title, big, beautiful bill. And Ileana, this money could have gone to health. This money could have gone to education. It could have gone to social rights when you're unemployed. It could have gone an investment. Look, where did it go? For a racial war. For a racial war. I have no other name about this ICE intervention. They're blended. And I have another question for you. I think we know the elections, the midterms elections are coming up in the US, and we have the whole house, lower house. What is the name in I forgot the name in English, in America, the Congress. The whole Congress is going to be changed. So really, you have some toss-ups, very important toss-ups, and a lot could change, right? You have, it's November 3rd, so House of Representatives, that was the name I was trying. You have around 430 seats that will be completely voted again. Senate, I think you have 35 seats. And then you have, in addition, many state elections like governors, state legislatures, and with the primaries varying from state to state. So the polling are showing a Democratic advantage between 4 and 6 points. So it looks like a competitive environment, it looks like. And also in the Senate, because we have Georgia as a deciding point, Maine, Michigan, and North Carolina, where you have those toss-ups. So my question to you, how much ICE action could influence these elections? What is the domestic political?
I mean, I imagine that. Okay, let's see. Like, I'm not obviously going to predict anything, but I would imagine that the Democrats are using this to their advantage, hugely to their advantage. It is actually very convenient for the Democrats to use, because essentially what's happened historically with the Democratic Party is that they've never actually they've never delivered for their base. Anyone who has voted for them,
They don't have a base. Their base are called, the Democratic base is actually bankers, Wall Street.
That's their genuine handlers, like, let's say, but their supposed base is supposed to be the average person, like that is, in theory, their marketing base is supposed to be the average person that's not a right-wing nut job, right? Like that's like their supposed base, but they haven't even delivered for that. So that's the issue of like any sort of tangible benefits, like healthcare, like anything, like the student loans that could have been something that they could have delivered, affordability. I mean, there's so many things in which they could deliver that they haven't really historically delivered. So this is a very convenient thing. Like, this is like you're saying, this is so much worse. Like, oh, you don't have a home to live in, like you can't afford rent. Well, what about you getting gunned down in the street? Do you want that? Like, can you imagine what your choices are right now? It's like, I would like to have affordable universal healthcare or universal healthcare. But do you want to get shot in the face? Like, imagine if that is like your choice. So it's very persuasive for the Democrats to use like ICE as if you vote for us, at least this is not going to happen to you.
And how do you think like Americans in general are perceiving ICE? Because I'll have to say, in one hand, I see Minneapolis in this visceral demonstration against this. Then you see the silence on the South, and then you see people like Megyn Kelly saying it's all okay, it's great. And we know how the white supremacists love those things. Okay, Alex Pretty wasn't a migrant. So how do you think the public is perceiving this?
I mean, I think that the more interesting question really and potential right now is not about the Democratic. Like, to be honest, the Democratic Party, sure, it's like a Band-Aid on a gaping, like someone has been amputated and now they're going to use a Band-Aid. That's essentially what like the Democratic Party is. But I think the opportunity right now with the general strikes is really building some sort of genuine enthusiasm for a third party, or actual political movements that genuinely want change in their country. I mean, I think that's where the opportunity is. If it's just going to go back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, it's just like the decline of the US is just absolutely guaranteed. There's nothing, we don't have to do anything definitely from the outside, but like, there's nothing that's going to save the US if it just goes back and forth in that duopoly. Like, what this moment really should galvanize for people is that there is a potential for something actually better than both the duopoly of the establishment. And if that and I absolutely believe that there are people on the ground, because like one of the commenters just rightly said, there are grassroots organizing groups on the ground that I am sure are utilizing this moment to educate their people on different things like socialism, or there are different political parties that they do need to actually gather more base. There's PSL, which is a party of socialism and liberation. There's the Green Party, of course, stuff like that. So that's where I think this is an opportunity for.
It could be a moment of awakening, right? When things are so obviously. There's a beautiful story after Hitler invaded Poland. I don't remember which writer wrote the story. It's a shame that I'm so bad with names. But after when Hitler started falling, his power started falling, this guy, this little boy who was in the school from priests who used to be against the Third Reich, this boy was so disheartened, and he's starting to rip off the Hitler placards, the Hitler banners everywhere. And then the priest said, no, leave it, because now it's very explicit. What does that mean? So I think we are in this awakening moments when, let's say, when they try the coup d'etat in Brazil, I think a lot of people will think, okay, Lula, Dilma, they will save the country. I can go on with my individual life. I don't need to care about politics. And all of a sudden, we had the opportunity to awake and engage. And I think you're right. I think this is a great opportunity to wake, engage, and reflect. And by reflecting, thinking of the future differently. That's why utopia is so important, because utopia opens the door to think differently, to imagine your future and not to receive it as a destiny. But look, I came across something so on point. I want to have your take on that. We have here Dr. Kim, and he's saying Israel trains IC. We have here shoot first, block the ambulances, call the victim a terrorist. And Ileana, this ain't a poetical license. This is not, it is a fact, a very well documented fact. We know Israel is sports technology, spy technology worldwide. We know Israel has a concentration camp called the occupied territories of Palestine, where they have never signed up to any anti-chemical weapon agreement. So they use all the available torture and mass murder weapons on the 21st century technology freely on Palestinians. We have been following this. And we have here, on the one hand, we have the IC is IDF, they are cooperating in America. We have this exclusively. ICE reactivated its $2 million contract with Israeli spyware Paragon following its acquisition by US Capital. We see here a very close link between US, as usual, but now importing this violence home. But it's not only that. We do have exchanges, seminars. They are often mediated by civil society associations, and I'm going to get into that, why I'm saying this, in which official and leaders, including profiles linked to immigration and homeland security, receive briefings, exchange praxis with Israeli bodies. And we know that Metropolitan Police, the UK Metropolitan Police, also does that, but they do that covertly. So there are plenty of exchange and training programs with Israel, with participation of US authorities, including ICE and DHS, as well the Metropolitan Police. And we have one example here is the National Counterterrorism Seminar that they do. It's organized by the Anti-Defamation League and takes all senior security and law enforcement officials from the US, from the UK, for technical visits, sessions with Israeli agencies, education, and that's what they do. It's the US delegations, they participate very often in that. I'll show you a few examples. The Guardian have reported as well about ADL criticizing themselves and saying, well, with the presence of ICE in Israel, they have become far more lethal. We are not so sure we want to participate. It was related, it was a leaked report, internal report whether they debated the possibility, but they carry on about George Floyd. And I don't know if you remember the Brazilian Jean Jimenez, who was shot in Southwark. I don't know, it's Southwark or Vauxhall in the UK. He was shot by the MI6. They claim he was a terrorist. He was not. He was only an illegal migrant, an electrician going to work. By the way, the UK won the process in the international courts. Yeah. They were trained by Israel in an operation.
It's like what we started this section with. This is the imperial boomerang, the tactics that we've been using around the world, overseas. We're now using them domestically. It's another example of how it works. Before we were just talking about it sort of abstractly, and you've concretely shown really how this sort of thing actually works. Like there's an actual way in which they do share tactics, share training, and now they're using it against our own citizens.
Yeah, and to treat citizens as terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who has rights is a terrorist. Terrorist abroad, not terrorist at home. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to exist to be a terrorist. ADL leadership seminar in Israel, resilience. I hate this word, resilience and counter-terrorism. This is such a corporate language to say, accept anything, be subject to any abuse, be resilient. If people abuses you, be resilient. And counter-terrorism this is very telling. And
they're using the term terrorist to talk about any sort of challenge to their power at the moment.
Yeah,
this is showing. We're seeing that in narco-terrorism in Latin America, for example, the Southern Operation Spear, etc. But this is really an example of just the weakness right now of U.S. imperialism, is that they can only use these extremely draconian measures to control their population, to control the rest of the world. And I think it's like kind of what we've been talking about, like how long is this going to work?
Yeah, we have a European and a American colonial enclave in the Middle East called Israel. I don't think you can call it a nation. It's a colonial enclave, but it's also Frankenstein. So they can unrestrained use the huge levels of violence that they might be restraining themselves at home. It's a laboratory for the world. That's why it is so crucial to denounce that. We have a laboratory of violence and torture and denigration and undignifying.
I think the thing is they didn't need to use it before, right? And now as material conditions deteriorate further, people are sort of slowly waking up to the fact that their countries are not, in fact, the most amazing countries in the world.
It takes a Trump to bring everything home.
Apparently, even while I was there, when I was living there, watching the decline of the country while I was living there was just very palpable. And the amount of delusion and the excuses that people would make for their politicians all the time, I think is just now run its course. Like, what excuse could you possibly have?
I think empires, they take so long. They are definitely on decline, but it takes so long for them to really fall. The Roman Empire, it took them.
Yes,
took 1,000 years to fall.
I guess we're seeing we're definitely we're witnessing it right now. But you're right, like how long this period is actually going to be. But it explains why. Really sort of adding to this conversation, but should we move on to the next topic because it's already one?
We should definitely move on. But look at that. Look, they're arresting children. They arrest children without their parents. 2-year-old girl. This 2-year-old girl, she was arrested under the ice. Confirmed. 2-year-old girl in Minnesota put on a plane to Texas despite judge ordering, requiring her release. This is Star Tribune reports. I've seen this just in Israel. Children going to.
I know that, yes, definitely Israel. But
the only place on earth I've ever seen this.
But ICE has been doing this for months now. Like, I think there were children, even in the last few months, even before this week, there's been children in detention without adult supervision, all sorts of things.
And they go on court on their own. I've seen a video where the judge asks, are you afraid to be here today? Do you know what a lawyer is? No. Do you have a lawyer? And then they said yes, but they had no lawyer. And the US government does have a lawyer. And these children, the first violation of their rights is because they are separating families. If your child was born in the US and the parents are migrants, you can't split the family. It's a fundamental human right, the right to family. No, you can't split family. It's called family reconciliation. And that's the first violation. The sheer fact that they are alone is already a blunted violation of their rights by the ICE, but also by the courts. It's shocking. And then these children go there without a right of anything, without representation, completely vulnerable to be deported. And imagine the trauma of these children on an ICE detention camp. There was a video where they are crying. They showed a guy in Minneapolis was outside of the detention center, and the children crying and shouting.
Yeah, there's
we don't have words, right, for that.
We don't have words because it's like it's so apparent for from the beginning that there was no reason for this type of ridiculous agency, ICE. So the fact that they were doubling down on every single thing to this point, it's shocking because, like you're saying, it just shows how little they really care about public perception at this point.
They don't care, or is the public perception supportive of this? This is something that I don't really know.
It's not really. I don't think so. It is. They are using it to, like we're saying, in some ways, but they've also lost control of it in some ways. And I think they're just incredibly delusional, though. But having said that, we can move on to another delusional part of Western media. I can't believe you were like, can we finish this in 1 hour? And we're already at 1:30. So, Sarah, I just think, but okay, let me just share my screen here. But we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about the Xi Jinping military shakeup. But of course, Western media is talking about this like a purge. It's a purge. China's a purge. Okay, and I wanted to show you this Fox News report.
Unbelievable. Okay, let's say what this. They're so reliable. They're so trustworthy. They love facts.
Oh, sorry. They love what?
Fox News love facts.
Oh my gosh. Fox News is hilarious. I'm not going to play this because this guy is a known propagandist. I just wanted to show this because it is hilarious to me. Okay, so this person is apparently Gordon Chang. Gordon Chang is one of the most famous anti-China propagandists that has been predicting China's collapse for the last 20 years. He's
collapse. What? Okay.
And they're still trotting him out. They're trotting him out now.
He's an illusionist. He should get a place in Vegas. Let's play with illusions.
He's so crazy. But so according to him, it's basically because Xi is purging the military, and Western media describe an extraordinary shakeup within China's military leadership. It is a significant thing.
What is actually going on, Ileana? Before can you explain to us what is actually going on?
Okay, so the way I just want to sort of position it this way. Okay, the way Western media is saying it is Xi Jinping has purged the top general because that general is not listening to him. And I just want to say how absurd that is, just to start, because the idea that it would be okay for the top military general to not listen to the country's leadership. Do you know what I mean? If that was
obvious that you have to fire them. Yes, it's absolutely obvious. Yeah.
That's so dumb. Yeah. So exactly, that's the way that the West is.
I don't know how it's in China, but in Brazil, the president is actually the head of the army.
Yes, same in China. The actual commanding force, which is like the Politburo, which is, you know, Xi Jinping would be above the general, which makes sense because, like, how could you have the military be above the leader of the country? That would be But looking at it further, it is actually significant. But I think it's significant in that, you know, I think one thing is that often because we don't know that much about China, we think like, oh, either everything is perfect or everything is horrible in China, when actually it's a very complicated country because it's 1.4 billion people.
Wow.
And the Central Military Commission commission, I think, underneath the Politburo is vast. It is, you know, the CMC, the military has like 15 sections to it. There are so many different things. And this general is under investigation for pretty serious accusations and allegations. And it is mainly to do with, it is insubordination, but because, for example, one of the charges was that he was signing off on decisions without passing it to leadership. That is
which in a military context, not to respect hierarchy. It's
that's insane. Yeah, you cannot do that. So that was part of it. So why it's a purge, like the way it seems a purge, was that he also was sort of, he's being accused of like cronyism, where he's hiring people in key positions under him to shore up his own power. Like that are the allegations against him. And that's why it's more than just him leaving, right? Him being investigated, but like 5 other. It makes sense. Like, so I want to put this in context for.
I think China has its internal rules.
Yeah.
And they have the right to apply the rules. And it's not
nothing to do with that.
How China has to regulate their own military. I mean, I know the US has been doing in Germany, because Germany is the occupied country by the US military, you know. So the US go putting their bases, they put a base on Brazil, close to Argentina. They just go and put their bases on. And because they can't have their way in China, they want to tell China how to deal with their own military.
I mean, I think
they want to attack.
Yeah, I mean, they also want to, I know, it's the irony of that. The other thing is the manufacturing consent thing, because if we think about the adjectives that are used for sovereign countries, like, you know, and when we look at the hyper-imperialism document, remember, I keep talking about it, but essentially it defines the 6 socialist independent countries. One was Venezuela, which, you know, sucks what's happening in Venezuela, but China, DPRK, which is North Korea, Cuba, and what was the other one? Laos and Vietnam, I think. So 6.
I could say that, yeah.
And it's always the same adjectives, right? They're dictators, they're authoritarian, they're like
regimes. They are not governments, they are regimes.
There's some sort of like petulant, like brat. Like if you say something against like Kim Jong-il or something, you know, you're disappeared, or you know what I mean? It's like they are always throwing tantrums. Like that's how the Western media portrays these countries. And so this is very much in line, like this whole media campaign is very much in line with that sort of thing, sort of creating this idea that Xi Jinping is like by himself, just getting rid of any military personnel that like disagrees with him. When in actuality, the allegations against this general is actually very serious and significant. But it also points to another thing which is important about Xi Jinping's leadership in China, which is that when he came into power in 2012, he made a very important sort of actions and movement towards anti-corruption. That was like one of the bases of his leadership is anti-corruption. The other one is the poverty alleviation program. That's like the last 100 million people were lifted out of poverty. But corruption was a huge part of his leadership. And the fact that they are, suspending this general.
Discrediting exactly one of his biggest achievements, right? He's fighting corruption within the army, and that needs to be an element of discreditation and implying authoritarianism to China. That it's such an old thing, isn't it? I'm getting bored with them.
Yeah,
How
I
can
mean, that's the thing.
You
Yeah.
need to be very, very uncultivated. You need to be very stupid to still believe this, or not to put an interrogation mark, at least, to buy it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the thing, is like when we actually look at it, we look at the actions, we look at like the fact that this general has been a really long time general. Like the retiring age for this sort of position is 68 and he's 75. So he's actually been in position for a lot longer than is normal anyway. And then the other thing is that he's second generation of China leadership. And that's one of the things that Xi Jinping has really cracked down on. Any sort of like nepotism or, generational, like, oh, my son will now be in this position, completely gone now in China. So this is like important,
Yeah, and this sounds very close to home to me, because it's the same pattern that is applied on Brazilian judiciary. So the Brazilian judiciary was achieved what Americans couldn't do. We had an attempted coup d'etat, and we brought to justice the military for the first time. And they were arrested, and they are in jail. Bolsonaro is in jail now for an attempted coup d'etat. An attempted coup d'etat which was highly financed, nothing organic, and he used a bunch of stupid people to go and destroy the Brazilian institution on the 8th of January, imitating what happened in the US, in the Capitolio in the US, but we brought them to justice. Now we have people like Glenn Greenwald, and you have Mark Schellenberger, and other absolutists of freedom of speech, whatever that means, libertarians, whatever that means. I think libertarians in American language means dictatorship of the individual. So these people go against the Brazilian judiciary, say the Brazilian judiciary is an authoritarian thing. No, we just don't accept people attempting coup d'etat, plotting the assassination of members of the Supreme Court, everything full. We had a perfect investigation by the federal police that took a lot of time. We have evidence after evidence of financing, of plotting, of the people involved, witness. It was a very well carried out process where Bolsonaro had the full right to defend himself, all his guarantees, which Lula never had, which left-wing never had. They had all constitutional guarantees intact. They have tried to exploit one of each of them. And then we have the US and Trump saying tariffs. It's unfair to have Bolsonaro in jail. I want you to release in jail, otherwise I'm going to impose a tariff on Brazilian society. So it rings the bell, this interference on national institutions, creating
I would say
distortion of facts.
But I would say it's not foreign interference in this case. There's no evidence of it. Some people are trying to claim that the CIA is involved here, and I don't actually think that's.
I'm saying in the case of Brazil, we had.
In the case of Brazil, that's very clear. I think in the case of Brazil,
the DOJ and departments.
Yeah. In the case of Brazil, that's very clear. But I just want to, because this is one of the allegations regarding the media around this, and it's just there's no evidence.
Yeah, but it's clear it's the US saying that you cannot operate your institutions by their own rules, and when those institutions are functioning, that's where they go for it. Yeah,
I mean, the US just has no power over China in this regard. So I think that is where, it's important to make that distinction that, actually sometimes some Chinese people are just corrupt.
Why not? Where there is power, where there's huge wealth, there will be a lot of people trying to prey on that. Yeah,
of course. So the fact that they're removing someone that has this type of influence, like for decades, I think speaks actually really highly instead, rather than looking at it from a negative thing. I actually think it actually speaks highly for the system working. Like,
Absolutely.
so actually it's a good thing. But we will see. We will see what happens, right? But obviously this idea there's a vacuum. It's like, it's so big, like that, like I was saying, there's like 15 different sections of this military commission. Like, it's gonna be fine. They'll figure it out. We don't.
It's a media persecution, and that you can't catch a break. They will be twisting and turn anything to portray China as an authoritarian regime, Brazil as a backyard that can't get its shit together. It's a persecution. The media is relentless in discrediting nations that have sovereignty powers on the play. They're afraid. And they're jealous as well, isn't it? I don't think the American military works that well, probably. It's probably very big, but doesn't work that well. Definitely the American justice system. I would prefer to face a Brazilian justice system than an American justice system, for sure. For sure.
I mean, when you looked at, do you remember the military parade, Trump's military parade, I think for his birthday, and then the victory parade in Beijing? Like, the difference between the two is quite extreme. But of course, we can't underestimate that now Trump is asking for a $1.5 trillion military budget. So whatever inefficiencies they may have in their military, which is definitely a lot, they will try to make up with like insane amounts of.
And if you think an army that has a lot of mercenaries, that has ultra-right, has an extremely violent potential, far more than a structured army that works with strategy, hierarchy, it's completely different. We are talking about a very belligerent and violent system.
Definitely.
That is now expressing itself at home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, the imperial boomerang, but also, like, to your point of like, this idea of are they, the US, are they just jealous? Let's move on.
They're jealous.
Well, I think the thing is that they're aware that they can't really compete head to head with China. I think that's what's happening. And right now we're seeing, like, here world leaders flock to Beijing. 5 world leaders have already visited Beijing.
Really?
Just in January. So, like, who is the latest one that's currently there is my own prime minister, Keir Starmer.
That moment, those are the moments I never say me. I say they are prime minister, the UK prime minister. I can't. It's too much to say that my prime minister.
I felt sick as soon as it left my mouth. But I did not vote for him. But anyway, here he is in Beijing. So the 5 prime ministers, we talked about Mark Carney visiting Xi already. And he did a reset trade deal earlier a few weeks ago. Uruguay's president, also South American. Who else has gone there? And there's like Finland has gone there.
Finland.
And then I think there's one more that I'm missing, unless I can't read, can't count either. But anyway, so Keir Starmer is there right now, and I think this is kind of like an interesting. Macron, was Macron the other one? Oh, Macron was last year. But anyway, this is like an interesting way in which the British do their diplomacy, which is very much like Macron. This is why I was thinking of Macron, is like basically they go there and they're really nice there because they want to reset some trade agreements, and they're kind of aware at this point, like we were saying, are the rats jumping the Titanic right now, but they're really aware right now that siding with the US and Trump's so-called Liberation Day really did not help the economy in any way for Canada or the UK, right? We've done a lot of like cutting off our nose to spite our face, by going with Trump. So it makes sense that they're going to China, but Keir Starmer has made it very clear that this is the first time in 8 years, and so he's very eager to reset trade agreements. However, at the same time as them doing that, all the media is basically bringing back all the anti-China propaganda at the same time. as this diplomatic mission.
Yeah, Ileana, let's not forget that Keir Starmer in the past called China a security threat, still calls it a security threat, but there are business to be done. You know, UK is running out of options, and maybe we need to talk about this with people that are from the UK. There was something called austerity, followed up by Brexit. In the delusion of being an empire, Britain has alienated itself systematically, first from the European Union. And then Britain thought that if they can impose sanctions is something that Britain loves to impose everywhere in the world, sacrificing, creating hunger, desperation in Syria, in Libya, you name it. They decided to retain Russian assets and sanction Russia over Ukraine in this NATO. What happened is that Britain, everything got triple the price in a very short time, but only the price for consumers. So I had in 10 years of service, 60% of my acquisition power reduced. It's a lot. It is a lot. It means that you need to have a second job to maintain a modest lifestyle. So it threw people on poverty, sanctions on Russia. It was this very heavy stone they lifted to just let it fall on their own feet. Because the oil from the gas and energy from Russia is coming through India, much more expensive. Germany is being deindustrialized. But I want to show you a pearl. Look, Keir Starmer, not a long time ago, teaching, I love Glenn Diesel. Maybe you could get him on the show. He say British PMs, Starmer, is taking a short break from supporting a genocide in Palestine, escalating a proxy war in Ukraine, and arresting British people for mean tweets to lecture China on human rights. This is last year in Rio. Look at him.
Very pleased that my Foreign Secretary and Foreign Minister Wang met recently and discussed respective concerns, including human rights and parliamentary sanctions, Taiwan, South China Sea, and our shared interest in Hong Kong. We are concerned by reports of Jimmy Lai's deterioration health in prison. You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone, and we have since taken action by calling in that application. Now we have to follow the legal process and timeline.
Yeah, so if you look at the interview conducted by BBC News yesterday in China, it's pretty much the same thing. Like, let's just play it because it's that.
Concrete outcomes, and it was a real strengthening of the relationship, and that's in the national interest because, of course, there are huge opportunities here in China. It's the second biggest economy in the world, and that's why we've got such a big business delegation. A lot of the discussion was about how we open up access for those opportunities, focusing, as I always do, on how is this going to be delivered back in the United Kingdom, how does it benefit people back at home. And we made some really good progress on tariffs for whiskey, on visa-free travel to China, and
sorry.
on irregular migration, focusing particularly on small boats and engine parts. So a very good constructive meeting with real outcomes, and that's very much in our national interest. The relationship is
so amazing. He got less tariffs for whiskey.
I say to everybody here,
I guess it wasn't in this clip, but in this interview, they are also like, but did you ask about Jimmy Lai and Xinjiang?
Oh,
and he was like, yes, of course, we brought that up, that it's up to them to, yeah, so it's exactly the same. I've talked about this on my social media, like that the 5 poison pills of anti-China propaganda is like Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, and Hong Kong. And the 5th one I put in like Falun Gong, which is the cult Falun Gong, which we have like the ballet Shenyun. It's actually all over London right now. That is a propaganda, anti-China propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
But it's right now showing in the UK. So he of course brings up the two things, like Jimmy Lai is now one of them, Hong Kong. Jimmy Lai is connected to the Hong Kong protests. And again, like this
Maybe you
idea.
should explain very briefly for audience, for the benefit of the audience, who is Jimmy Lai?
Okay, so Jimmy Lai is someone that they're calling a pro-democratic journalist. They're calling him a journalist. I mean, the committee for
a lot of spies are journalists, yeah.
Right. But the thing is, he's actually an almost billionaire. He owns Giordano, which is a clothing brand. He's really like an almost billionaire that owned this media outlet called Apple Daily, which was essentially a tabloid. It's not a journalistic, like investigative journalist. No, it's a tabloid. Like it reported on things like celebrity gossip, and it was like famous for doing very dodgy things like upskirting women and stuff like that. So basically, that tabloid though was involved in the Hong Kong protests. He sort of funded as well certain sections of the protesters in a sort of like a militia type of way. And then during that time, during the Hong Kong protests, he also made visits to the US, talked to Mike Pence to advocate for the protests, like to advocate for the protests in quotation marks. And he also
now let's say
he's an asset. He also very famously in public recorded on a stage said, you in the US, you guys have nuclear weapons. China, you can finish the issue in like minutes. Like, how do you say this in the US, saying you have nuclear weapons, you can finish China in a few minutes? So he's so obviously someone that's been, foreign collusion. I think that's like textbook someone who's doing that.
And I have something here that is really laughable. So after Keir Starmer closed this amazing deal with China of less tariffs for whiskey, and British citizens will now be able to travel to China without needing to get a visa. Wow, but the government has confirmed the visa travel will be for trips up to 30 days. Look at the British reaction. They are selling China. They're selling the UK to China. No, you already sold out. You already sold out to the US.
Oh, they're saying that.
It's really funny. I mean, it's not ugly to laugh, is it? Look at that. Look at that.
Of other Labour people that have gone there and laid the groundwork to sell the UK off to China. This trade deal and this trip is an absolute farce and will absolutely screw the United Kingdom over for years to come. And I know it's like, we don't think about China that much. And even as Mark Saber said, it's always the, Russian oligarchs that we think about. The Chinese own most of this country. They're just not as vocal about it as some of the other countries that have come in and tried to take power. So I think it's really, really scary, and we don't think about China enough. We've got two threats. There is the threat of Islamist extremism for the West, and then there's China, and they're very much having the same gravitas and the same pull.
I couldn't agree.
Among a string.
It's very interesting how in Britain, people are very trained at school to have a good rhetoric, right? She uses all the right terms, gravitas, she put a Latin term on it, but the discourse is empty. And that is something I have seen in Britain so often. People who are very eloquent, look how proud, how ignorantly proud she is, how certain of her ignorance she is.
What is even her point? I mean,
it's pitiful what she's saying. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and she's so proud of, so certain, so such a level of conviction. And this is part of the British education. You have people talking nonsense and empty word, using those buzzwords to say nothing. You have this in British environment over and over and over again, but they are very eloquent. So that seals the deal. The lack of content is irrelevant. But look at in this case, look how the level of ignorance is crazy. Don't you think so?
Well, I mean, let's look. This is mirrored actually really almost verbatim by the Tory Conservative leader, current one, Kemi Badenoch. Oh my God, I'm so bad with names.
Badenoch.
Badenoch.
Even wants the names, but let's help the blind. Let's help the blind.
Okay, so sorry I snorted because I was laughing at you. All right, okay, so let's see what she has to say. It's almost exactly the same.
No, not now, because I don't think that this is the time to do that. We need to be talking to those other countries who are worried about the threat China is posing to them. We should be talking more to those countries who are aligned with our interests, not the country that is doing everything it can to undermine our economy.
To undermine our economy?
Your economy doesn't work. You have undermined your economy by your own right. You have Brexit. You have expelled the people out of your country that brought the. You know, one thing I think people don't understand about Brexit is that the foreigners are the one who brought the jobs in. You know, they brought them the banks in because they needed. London used to be a very international cosmopolitan environment. So it was the place to go if you needed people speaking German and English, Spanish and English, Mandarin and English. You know, it was a exclusive and very sophisticated environment because of this international confluence that London had, that I don't even know if New York has the same. And they expel all of these people out of the country. So the banks move away of the country after Brexit because they no longer can have a free trade with Europe. American Express went to Madrid. You have lots of banks going to France. So you shoot on your feet. You ruined your economy. You created austerity for years and years to come. And then you say China is threatening you. No, you did it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is it's because of capitalism and imperialism that we have devastated our economy, like this slavish devotion to imperialism.
Yeah.
This basically, we have no productive forces here. We have no, you know, we don't have anything tangible here. We're completely like the financialized type of economy that has nothing tangible to lay on, right? And apparently that's China's fault. Like, in what way would China be trying to undermine our economy? Like, how would they even benefit from doing that? Because they're trying to trade with us, right? Like, essentially, that's their main economic model in terms of foreign policy is like, yes, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is about development in like global South countries, but then for global North countries, it's just market, right? It's like trade deals,
sheer projection, because Britain goes ruining countries and people all over the world for centuries. They think everybody else is doing this, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, when you think it can get worse, it does. Look at that. It's clear that Starmer is a Chinese communist sympathizer. He's granting Chinese permission to be the mega embassy spy center in London. He's giving away the Kagis Island to China, ally Mauritius. He wants digital ID, no free speech, and protest crackdowns, treason. He's a communist sympathizer.
Does this even make sense? Like, the whole thing about this super embassy is super embassy. It's like gonna be obviously on Google Maps. It's like everyone's gonna know where it is. Like, and they're like, they're gonna be spying. It's like,
well,
we
know the embassies that have spied all over the world is called the US Embassy. We have the cables from WikiLeaks being revealed. And Che Guevara said, if you want to have a spy on your territory, put an American embassy. I mean, we had said this before the leaks. Yeah.
It's complete and utter projection. But I think the thing that is just like hilarious about it is like, if you're announcing this massive embassy to everyone, and this is how you're going to do this secret, covert spy missions from the, like, you just told everybody that you were, you know. But yes, the reason why they're doing this, exactly to your point, is because the US absolutely does this across the world, but China doesn't do this because they do not do regime change in other countries. So what would be the purpose of doing it in the UK? Are you telling me that China is going to try to do a regime change in the UK? Like, how would they even manage to do that? Like, you know, they don't have
everybody else is, because I can think only the world as a destruction and competition. It means everybody else is. And yesterday you had a beautiful interview here on Global Majority for Peace, and the guests, which name, of course, I don't remember, she was saying China is triumphing not because of capitalism, because of socialism. I thought this was a very important interview. I invite people to watch it. But you know, Ileana, when you think it can't get any worse, it gets worse again. Do you want to hear this? Yeah, you can laugh. It's okay.
Today proved that Sir Keir Starmer isn't just incompetent, he's actively dangerous for Britain's national security. Yesterday, the man who I think is a serial liar stood before us and said this.
That is why we take the approach that we do, because it delivers concrete outcomes in the national interest.
He said he would always act in Britain's national interest. Well, today, he has just approved the Chinese mega embassy. This is despite MI5 saying that it will be impossible to eliminate the security risks, despite it being revealed that there are 208 underground rooms, including a chamber directly over the cables that lead to the City of London and that carry millions of people's personal emails every single day. I think China will obviously use it to spy on us. They've previously hacked all our diplomatic cables. The Chinese are believed to have installed listening devices in British military vehicles. And then, of course, there was the Chinese spy scandal, the case against two men accused of spying for China. Obviously, they deny those allegations. But Sir Keir Starmer was accused of collapsing that case. It will also drive another nail into the coffin of our relationship with President Trump's America. Talking of which, today, President Trump has called Starmer stupid over the Chagos Islands giveaway. He released this statement. Shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of the US military base, to Mauritius, and to do so for no reason whatsoever. There is no doubt that China and Russia have noticed this act of total weakness. The UK giving away extremely important land is an act of great stupidity and is another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired. Right. Well, do you remember?
Ileana, before you give your take on that, one thing I have to agree is that Keir Starmer is a liar and the national security threat to anywhere, to especially as the UK Prime Minister. But apart from that, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you with Keir Starmer. However, yeah, I mean, there's so many issues here that are just like completely ridiculous. One thing is we know, again, the projection thing, we know through Snowden that there is surveillance on us, like as citizens of like the UK or as like residents of the UK or residents of the US, right? We know that there is mass surveillance on our citizens, right? And we also know how ineffective it is to just gather information from every single person.
I want information from everyone and get everything from everyone, doesn't matter who.
Yeah, what's the purpose of that? Like
granny, the 90-year-old granny, we want to know what she's doing on WhatsApp. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, imagine the amount of data you would have to sift through for it to be useful. And why would China spend that much time and resources on something so ridiculous like that? It needs to be like not mass surveillance like that, you know? And the reason why like our data is always mined, though, in global north countries and capitalist countries, is that they sell our data, which is actually not allowed in China. So there's just like a limited use for this type of mass surveillance from China on us.
Yeah, and we know the real threat is the US, is the NSA, as you said, as you pointed out by Edward Snowden. And I remember Chris Hedges, when he gave me an interview, he was talking about the Utah black box. So in America, anything you put online, it belongs automatically to the government, even very private details, medical details. If you're going to apply for a job, which people do everything online today, all your data will be property of Microsoft, friends, and the NSA. So who's the threat here? Who's the threat?
It doesn't, there's no logic to it. Again, it is projection. I mean, whenever they make an accusation against China, we've got to think about what are they doing to us and other, you know, we have to do it that way, because
and the level of naive trust in the US is absurd. I'll give you a very concrete example. The British government works with Microsoft, everything, national security secrets, agendas, meetings, everything go into a Microsoft system. Do they really believe that they own that data? Does the British government really? But on the other hand, you cannot travel with your laptop to a European country, for instance. You are posing the threat by taking the physical laptop with you. But on the other hand, they can just give everything to the US. Imagine the public policies, things that protects our rights. We as British citizens, you don't want the US to know the public policies. You don't want and this is all given to the US, and they think they won't make any use of it. They'll make a friendly use of it, a very friendly use. Oh, anyway, we're Six Eyes anyway, so we trust America. And America is not recognized by the Brits as the problem at all. It's always Russia, it's always China, it's South America doesn't even qualify to be a threat. Brazilians doesn't even qualify. We're just the garbage of the world.
I mean, I guess the question is, does the general public view the US as a threat? Versus, obviously, these media corporations are not going to, because they're just like completely an arm of the imperial agenda. So they're just gonna, essentially, they're just gonna repeat the talking points of the imperial agenda, whatever that is, right? But does the actual public? I somewhat fear that the actual public does view Russia and China as a threat. I mean, that's the problem that we're having right now. They need to watch Empire Watch.
Yeah.
They need to show. Although I think I lost.
I think Karl Marx said it all. He said, the fight is a class fight. It's international. To say it's not about countries. It's about a class system. I think, of course, we are dividing countries. We have the sovereignty need to be respected, but our enemies is not China, it's not Russia, is the capital and is the capitalists on our system, hijacking our political achievements, our legal achievements. These are the people we need to fight against.
Yes. So, that's the question. It's just like in the US, how do we make headway here in the UK? I think, first of all, we just have to be really clear-eyed that we're part of the system. That's obvious, right? We just have to be clear-eyed. And then I really don't know. After 2 hours, we actually managed 2 hours and 15 minutes. I'm out of ideas right now of how do we save our countries if we even want to, really. But yes, we actually did it. We actually got under 3 hours. Sarah. Oh, you're muted yourself. Unmute.
That's an achievement. Ileana, definitely proud of us. And thanks for everyone that bared with us through those videos. It was, first of all, horrific ice videos, but at least we got to laugh a bit with the British ignorance on China.
Right.
And,
yeah, we had a little laugh at the UK. But yes, thank you so much for anyone who is still watching. Thank you. We do appreciate it.
Thank you to Ethelol, to Oates, to John Trudell. I'm looking at their names here, very participating here. Thank you for being with us. Cool Crab 2010, Havaiogia is always with us. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week, hopefully, with Paul Laradu, right? Okay.
Paul Larudi, yeah. Next week we have Paul Larudi, one of the founders of the Flotilla.
Yes, and a really interesting conversation, hopefully. Okay.
Zone's advisors on Iran. A friend of Mark's Blumenthal, close friend of Mark's.
Okay, so we'll see what he has to say about Iran. But thank you, everyone, and see you guys next week. Okay, I'm going to end the stream.